Hi, today's gospel is in Acts, and it's chapter 2, and it's about Pentecost. And of course, most of us know the story where the Holy Spirit comes down upon the disciples and they're filled in the Holy Spirit, they've got flames on their heads, and they speak in all these different languages. Now, the languages in verse 9 and 10 list all the countries that these Jewish people had come from to celebrate Pentecost in Jerusalem. And they hear Peter's message and they go back. And there's something amazing. They hold that message in their hearts. Years later, the disciples go and they visit these people wherever they are in the known world then, and they still hold the message of Christ in their hearts. Now, I was given a challenge the other day to write an essay on what is called Pentecost in postmodernity. In other words, the modern world today, and how we communicate Pentecost in that modern world today. And the church wrestles with that quite a bit. Should we somehow do church youth group meetings or Emmaus meetings and introduction to the faith meetings and all this kind of stuff? And the reality is that they're all good and they've been going for years, but does this really resonate to the world in who we are? We've had something very interesting happen, and that is that the pandemic has come and it's closed down all our churches. So the churches are actually right now redefining who they actually are, or really who the people are as God's church. And you've got to understand that we live in a world where largely people haven't really got a concept of what church is out there. They think we're some kind of organisation and like a group or a club, and or an institution to do a specific role in the community, but they don't see themselves as part of that. And how do we bring the reality of Christ to a world like that? Well, I want to explore this. You see, Peter, when he spoke that sermon, he was speaking to mostly Jewish people. And what he did in that sermon is he connected the truth of Christ and the relevance of Christ to their own belief system. And he showed where Jesus fit in the midst of that. That's why it says that the people were cut to their heart when they heard and they believed, because it just completely made sense to them. And this is where Paul found the same situation when he shared with Gentiles who worshipped all different kinds of gods. He found that if he was able to connect with them in their own mindsets, their own belief systems, and then show where Jesus actually could fit and where he could be real in their lives, without opposing them and confronting them in a conflict kind of situation, he was able to bring the truth of Christ out. Because when you think about it, our gospel's pretty weird. We follow a bloke who said he was God, who got nailed to a cross, and then we say he rose again, but now he's out there somewhere in the cosmos, but if you believe in him, he'll come in you and he'll make you like him. Now, Paul put it quite nicely, and I'll just read this, that Most Jews have problems with this, and most Gentiles think it's foolish. And that's in 1 Corinthians 1:23. So why would we think the understanding of someone else in the world today would think any different? So how do we bring the message of Christ into the community? Well, Paul and Peter were really gifted by God to be able to bring a message clearly and distinctly to the communities they were in. But not all of us are like Paul and Peter. We don't have that kind of evangelistic gift. And sometimes when we're confronted with someone that's an evangelist, we feel inadequate, somewhat unarticulate, because we can't really put what we believe. The reason being is that we have this knowing, this believing deep within our souls. And that is the work of the Holy Spirit. Just like He quickened those people's hearts that Peter spoke to, we have this knowledge within our soul. I call it when the language of the mind connects with the language of the soul without reason. God puts it there, and we know that we know, even though sometimes it's too hard to be able to articulate. However, there's another language that we can use, and that is the language of being as Christ. And it's not doing good stuff. It's really about the language of being as Christ's church stuff, being the church and who the church is. You see, God didn't call us to be good people. He called us to be like Him. And when we accept Christ, the Holy Spirit works within our soul. And so, like incense rising and permeating the presence of a room, so we can be that presence, God's presence, in amongst our own community. And when I say in amongst our own community, what I'm really saying is in amongst our everyday friends outside of church. We don't have to articulate things perfectly, but we can simply be the character and the nature of Christ, because what works and what makes that work in us is the power of the Holy Spirit within our souls. We didn't have our hands laid on our heads, and we didn't have that prayer prayed that we were filled in the Holy Spirit if it was for nothing. But we have to want and continue to want that to work in our souls. And when we do, His power, His authority is greater than our words. So when we're talking about Pentecost, we're talking about the work of the Holy Spirit. That's what He does for us, because He gives us that knowing, but He also gives us that being as Christ, that we can live His virtues and let those virtues affect others as we rub shoulders with them. And so Pentecost is more than just a long time ago. And it's more than just a charismatic thing that some churches put on a pedestal. It is actually an impartation in our lives of the Holy Spirit, which leads and guides us, and with which we can commune with and ask that Christ be the very real in our lives. And when we're like that, the world sees and knows what Christ is and the reality of Christ in our lives. It's a real and living fact. In fact, in Acts, after Peter's sermon, the church per se, and it wasn't really church. It was people just gathering and being as Christ among each other, but out there throughout the community. And because of that, the whole of the community was blessed. And you know what? They received the gospel. That is the amazing thing, that God actually takes the load of us, the chore of spreading the gospel, and he works it through our lives. God bless you. God keep you. And in this wintry weather in Adelaide, I pray that you all stay warm. And see you later.